The man I buried 3 years ago just ordered coffee in line ahead of me. And here I am, holding our son, watching my world collapse for the second time. Dear viewers, please share in the comments which country you're watching from. It means a lot to me. Enjoy listening. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and until this moment, I thought I knew what pain was. 3 years ago, I lost my husband Daniel in a car accident, or so I was told. For 3 years, I raised our son Ethan alone, learning to rebuild my life, putting walls around my heart and trying to forget what happiness looked like. But this morning, standing in a Starbucks in Denver, I realized the last 3 years of my life were a lie. The man I buried 3 years ago just ordered coffee in line ahead of me, and here I am holding our son, watching my world collapse for the second time. It all started so innocently. I decided to move from Chicago to Denver for a fresh start. Ethan was only 2 when the tragedy happened, and now, at 5, he barely remembered his father. Maybe that was for the best, I thought. Maybe we both needed a clean slate. I got a job offer from an architecture firm in Denver, a great position, good pay, a chance to build something new. Ethan and I flew out for the weekend to look at apartments and get a feel for the city. It was supposed to be a simple reconnaissance mission, a chance to make sure we were making the right choice. But life loves to throw surprises when you least expect them. That Saturday morning, Ethan and I stopped by a Starbucks on 16th Street. I wanted coffee, and he wanted hot chocolate before we headed to see another apartment. The line was long, and Ethan was getting restless. He was tired of moving and new places. "Mom, when are we going home?" he whined, clinging to my leg. "Soon, buddy," I said softly, ruffling his hair. "We just need to grab coffee, then we'll check out one more apartment, okay?" Ethan huffed, but stayed close. I was scanning the menu, debating between a latte and a cappuccino, when I heard a voice that stopped my heart. Large Americano, no sugar, double shot of espresso. That voice. Deep, slightly husky, with that particular cadence when he ordered coffee. I knew that voice better than my own. I'd heard it every morning for 7 years of marriage. I'd heard it in my dreams for the last 3 years. Slowly, afraid to trust my ears, I looked up. A man of medium height with dark hair, lightly touched with gray, stood just a few feet away. He wore a gray shirt and jeans, exactly the way Daniel used to dress. His profile, the line of his shoulders, even the way he kept his hands in his pockets. It was all painfully familiar. But it couldn't be him. Daniel Mitchell died 3 years ago. I saw the crash, the wrecked car, the funeral. I held his ashes in my hands. The man turned to wait for his order, and I saw his face. It was Daniel. The air rushed out of my lungs as if I'd been punched. The world spun, the sounds of the coffee shop fading into a muffled hum. I gripped Ethan's hand so tightly he yelped. "Mom, that hurts," he protested, trying to pull away. But I couldn't look away from the man. Daniel looked older, with new lines around his eyes, but it was undeniably him. My husband. My son's father. The man I'd mourned for 3 years. He grabbed his coffee and headed for the door. As he passed, his eyes flicked toward me, and our gazes locked. The same shock I felt was mirrored on his face. His eyes widened, and his coffee slipped from his hand, spilling across the floor. For a few seconds, we just stared, unable to believe what we were seeing. "Sarah?" His voice was barely a whisper. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could do was stand there, staring at the ghost of my past. Ethan tugged at my hand. "Mom, who's that?" he asked, looking at Daniel curiously. "Why does he know your name?" Daniel's eyes dropped to Ethan, and I saw his face change. Pain. Longing. Something like desperation flashed across it. He was looking at his son, a son he hadn't seen in 3 years, a son who didn't recognize him. Daniel started, but the words caught in his throat. People around us began to notice the spilled coffee and the strange scene unfolding in the middle of the coffee shop. Someone brought napkins. Someone asked if everything was okay, but I heard none of it. The world had narrowed to this moment, to this man who was supposed to be dead. I have to go, Daniel said suddenly, stepping back. Sarah, I can't do this here. He turned and hurried toward the door. Something inside me snapped, and I rushed after him, dragging Ethan along. Daniel, wait, I shouted, bursting onto the street. Wait, damn it! He stopped by a black sedan parked at the curb and slowly turned to face me. The pain on his face made me want to cry. Sarah, please, not here. Not in front of him, he said, nodding toward Ethan, who clung to my hand, watching us with wide eyes. Then where? My voice trembled with rage and desperation. Where, Daniel? At the morgue? At the cemetery? Where was I supposed to talk to you for the last 3 years? He closed his eyes as if my words physically hurt him. Grand Hyatt Hotel, room 1247. Tonight at 8. Please, come alone. Mom, Ethan tugged at my sleeve. I want to go home. I'm scared. I looked down at my son, his confused face, the way he pressed against me, sensing my tension. He was too young to understand what was happening, but old enough to know something was wrong. When I looked up, Daniel was getting into the car. 8 o'clock, Sarah. I'll explain everything. I promise. He drove away, leaving me on the sidewalk with our son, 1,000 questions, and the feeling that my entire world had just turned upside down. Again. The rest of the day passed in a haze. I canceled the apartment viewing, took Ethan back to our hotel, and tried to act normal. But how do you pretend everything's fine when your dead husband just ordered coffee at Starbucks? Mom, who was that guy? Ethan asked over lunch, playing with his fries. Just an old friend, sweetie. He seemed familiar, Ethan said, frowning, like I've seen him before. My heart clenched. Of course he seemed familiar. Daniel was his father, but how do you explain to a 5-year-old that the man he thought was dead just showed up in a coffee shop? How do you explain what you don't even understand yourself? That evening, I left Ethan with a sitter at the hotel and drove to the Grand Hyatt. The entire way I rehearsed what I'd say to Daniel. All the things I'd wanted to tell him for 3 years if I'd had the chance. But now that the chance was here, I didn't know where to start. I went up to the 12th floor and knocked on room 1247. Daniel opened the door almost immediately, as if he'd been waiting right behind it. He'd changed into a dark shirt and slacks, looking tired and older. The pain in his eyes made me want to hug him, like in the old days. But then I remembered. This man let me believe he was dead for 3 years. Sarah, he said, stepping aside to let me in, thank you for coming. I walked into the room but didn't sit. I couldn't relax, couldn't pretend this was a normal conversation. Explain, I said, crossing my arms. Explain why you're alive while I've been mourning you for 3 years. Explain why I've been telling our son bedtime stories about how much his daddy loved him when you just abandoned us. Daniel sank into a chair, burying his face in his hands. It's not that simple, Sarah. Then make it simple, I snapped. Are you dead or alive? That's simple enough. Alive, he said quietly. Obviously alive. Why? My voice broke. Why did you do this to us? Daniel looked up, his eyes red. Because I was supposed to die, Sarah. Not metaphorically, literally. They were going to kill me. I sat on the couch across from him, my legs no longer holding me. What are you talking about? Wasaku? Remember the Vegas project? The casino complex I was working on in the months before I staged it? I nodded. Of course I remembered. Daniel was an architect, and that project was supposed to be his big break, a huge contract, big money, a chance to start his own firm. I found out the money for the project was dirty. Drugs, human trafficking, God knows what else. When I tried to pull out, they told me the people funding it don't take no for an answer. He stood, walked to the window, and faced away from me. They said if I didn't finish the project and keep quiet, they wouldn't just kill me. They'd kill you and Ethan, too. A chill ran down my spine. Daniel? I tried to find a way out, Sarah. I swear I did. I went to the FBI, but they didn't have enough evidence to make arrests. And those people... They started showing they were watching us. Remember that black van that kept showing up near our house? Remember when Ethan said a strange man asked about him at preschool? I remembered. I'd chalked it up to paranoia, to stress from work. But now... So, you faked your death, I said. I had a friend in the police, Mike Connor. He helped me set it up. We staged the crash, found a body. His voice broke. Sarah, it was the only way to protect you. If they thought I was dead, they had no reason to come after you. I sat in silence, trying to process his words. Part of me wanted to believe him, to accept his explanation. But the part of me that had lived with the pain of his loss for 3 years was burning with rage. "And you didn't think to ask me?" I said slowly. "You didn't think I might want to know the truth, that we could have figured it out together?" "Sarah, no." I stood, pacing the room. "You made the decision for both of us, for all 3 of us. You decided what was best without asking." "I was protecting you. You destroyed us," I shouted. "Do you have any idea what I went through? What Ethan went through? He grew up for 3 years without a father, thinking his dad was dead." Daniel turned to me, tears streaming down his face. "I know. God, Sarah, I know. Every day for the last 3 years, I thought about you. Every night, I fell asleep imagining Ethan growing up without me. You think it was easy? You think I didn't want to be with you? Then why? Why didn't you come back when the danger was gone?" He fell silent, turning back to the window. "Daniel, why didn't you come back?" "Because..." His voice was barely audible. "Because I didn't know how. Too much time had passed. You'd built a life without me. Ethan doesn't remember me. And you learned to be happy without me, didn't you?" I opened my mouth to answer, but no words came. Was I happy? I'd learned to live, that was true. I'd learned to be strong, independent, to build a life for me and Ethan. But happy? "I learned to survive," I said finally. "That's not the same as being happy." We stood in silence for a few minutes. Outside, dusk settled over the city, lights flickering on. Somewhere out there, in another hotel, our son was waiting for me, unaware that his world was about to change again. "What now?" I asked. "I don't know," Daniel said honestly. "I didn't plan for us to meet. I moved to Denver 6 months ago, thinking I'd be safe here. I started a new life under a new name. Then this morning, I saw you in the coffee shop and you realized you couldn't just disappear again? And I realized I didn't want to. Sarah, I know I have no right to ask for forgiveness. I know what I did is unforgivable, but I miss you. I miss Ethan. I miss our family." Tears welled in my eyes, but I forced myself not to cry. Not now. "Do you have someone?" I asked. "Does your new life include a new family?" Daniel shook his head. "No one. I couldn't. After what I left behind, I couldn't be with anyone else." "And the danger? The people you were hiding from?" "Most of them are in prison. The FBI finally got enough evidence. The Vegas project collapsed, and their whole network fell apart. I've been following the news. I think we're safe." "You think," I repeated, "but you don't know for sure." "Nothing in life is certain, Sarah. That was true, and we both knew it." I walked to the door, my hand on the knob. "I need time to think." "Of course, as much as you need. And if I decide to let you see Ethan, it'll be on my terms. Completely on my terms." "Yes." "Anything you say." I opened the door but turned back. "Daniel." "What's your name now?" "David Harrison." "David Harrison," I repeated. "Do you like being David?" He gave a sad smile. "No, I liked being your husband." I left without responding. In the elevator, I finally let the tears fall. The next few days were a nightmare. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. Ethan noticed something was wrong, which made it even harder. I decided to stay in Denver another week, putting off decisions about the job and the move on Thursday night with Ethan asleep. I sat in our hotel room staring at my phone. Daniel had given me his number before I left. I dialed it 5 times but hadn't pressed call. Finally, I did. "Sarah?" He answered on the first ring. "I want you to meet Ethan," I said without preamble. "But there are conditions." "I'm listening. For now, he knows you as David, just an old friend of mine. If you want to tell him the truth, we do it together when I decide he's ready." "Agreed. We meet in public, a park, somewhere with people." "Of course. And Daniel, if you ever disappear from his life without explanation, I'll kill you myself. He chuckled softly. Fair enough. We arranged to meet Saturday at Washington Park. I spent Friday preparing Ethan, explaining we'd meet the man from the coffee shop, my old friend, and it'd be nice to get to know him. Why does he want to meet me? Ethan asked, building a Lego tower. Because you're important to me and he's my friend, Ethan shrugged, accepting it with the ease kids have for the adult world. Saturday was sunny and warm. We arrived at the park early, and I spotted Daniel from a distance, sitting on a bench, feeding ducks. He looked nervous, glancing our way. Ethan, I said, crouching beside him, see that man on the bench? That's David, the friend I told you about. Ethan nodded, studying him curiously. He's tall, he said. Yeah, tall. Want to go say hi? We approached the bench. Daniel stood, and I saw him struggle to keep his emotions in check. Hey, he said. You must be Ethan. Yep, Ethan said, hiding behind my leg, shy. I'm David. Your mom and we go way back. Do you know how to feed ducks? Ethan asked, intrigued by the bag of bread in Daniel's hand. Sure do. Want to try? Ethan nodded and Daniel handed him a piece of bread. For the next hour, I watched my dead husband teach our son to feed ducks, play ball, and tell silly jokes that made Ethan giggle. It was beautiful and agonizing all at once. Mom, Ethan said as we walked back to the car, David's nice. He's funny. Yeah, sweetie, he is. Why's he so sad? I stopped. What do you mean? He was smiling, but his eyes were sad. Like yours sometimes, when you think about Dad. Out of the mouths of babes. A 5-year-old saw what I'd been trying to ignore. Daniel was hurting as much as we were. That night, with Ethan asleep, I called Daniel again. He likes you, I said. He's amazing, Sarah. So smart, so funny. He's like you. Actually, he's more like you. Same eyes, same chin. Do you think he'll ever... I don't know, I said honestly. It depends on a lot. Like what? Like whether you can prove you won't disappear again, like whether you and I can figure out how to be in the same room without hurting each other. Sarah, his voice grew serious. I know we can't go back to what we had. I know I broke that, but I want to be part of Ethan's life, if you'll let me. And my life? A long pause. I want to be part of your life too, but I know I don't have the right to want that. No, I agreed, you don't. But even as I said it, I felt something in me soften. Daniel had done a terrible thing, but he'd done it out of love, a warped, misguided love, but love nonetheless. On Sunday, we met again. This time, Ethan was chattier, telling Daniel about his toys, preschool, and how he was learning to read. Daniel hung on every word as if memorizing them in case it was the last time. David, Ethan said during our third meeting, do you have kids? Daniel looked at me, unsure. No, he said finally. I don't have kids. Do you want any? Very much. Then you can be my second dad, Ethan declared with the carefree logic of a child. My friend Jamie at preschool has 2 dads, and it's super cool. Daniel couldn't hold back tears. He turned so Ethan wouldn't see, but it was too late. David, are you crying? Ethan walked over, putting a small hand on his shoulder. Don't cry. Mom says it's okay to cry, but I don't like when grown-ups cry. I'm crying because I'm happy, Daniel said, hugging him. Sometimes people cry when they're happy. Really? Ethan looked to me for confirmation. Really, buddy? I said, feeling tears well up myself. That night, I decided it was time to tell Ethan the truth, or at least part of it. Ethan, I said as we got ready for bed, remember how I told you about your dad? How he died when you were little? Yep, you said he was in an accident. Yeah, but sometimes grown-ups make mistakes. Sometimes we think something happened, but something else did instead. Ethan frowned, trying to understand. David is your dad, Ethan. He didn't die in an accident. He just went away for a while. But now he's back. Ethan was quiet for a few minutes, processing. So I have a dad, a real dad? Yes, buddy, you have a dad. Why did he go away? How do you explain danger, betrayal, and complex adult decisions to a 5-year-old? Because he wanted to protect us, but he did it the wrong way. Grown-ups sometimes do silly things even when they mean well. Like when I hid the broken cup under the couch? Kind of like that, yeah. Ethan nodded, accepting it. Is he going to stay now? I don't know, buddy. That depends on a lot. I want him to stay. He does funny voices when he reads stories. The next day, I met Daniel alone at the same coffee shop where it all began. I told him, I said, he knows you're his father. Daniel closed his eyes as if struck. How did he take it? Better than I expected. Kids are more resilient than we think. And you? How are you handling it? I thought about it for a long time. Honestly, I'm still angry at you. For all the nights I cried myself to sleep. For all the birthdays, first days of school, Ethan's first words that you missed. For having to be strong alone when I didn't have to be. Daniel nodded, absorbing my words. But, I continued, I also understand you thought you were doing the right thing. And I see how Ethan lights up around you. He needs a father. And you? What do you need? That was the million-dollar question, wasn't it? I need guarantees, I said finally. I need to know that if we try to build something new, not what we had, but something completely new, you won't vanish at the first sign of trouble. Sarah, he leaned across the table, taking my hand, I disappeared once to protect you. I'll never disappear again. Ever. Promises are easy to make. Then tell me what I need to do to earn your trust. Anything. I looked at this man, my husband, my son's father, the ghost of my past, and realized that despite all the pain, all the anger, I still loved him. Maybe not the way I did before. Maybe this love was now scarred and cautious. But it was still there. First therapy, I said. Family therapy. We all need help sorting through this mess. Agreed. Second, complete honesty. No secrets, no protective lies. If there's a problem, we solve it together. Agreed. And third, time. Lots of time. We can't just go back to what was. We need to build something new, and that'll take months, maybe years. I have time, he said. I have a lifetime. We started slowly. Daniel rented an apartment near our hotel. I decided to stay in Denver, partly for the job offer, partly because starting a new chapter in a new city felt symbolic. Every day, Ethan spent a few hours with Daniel. They went to the park, to museums, or just walked around the city talking. Daniel told him stories about when he was a baby, stories I thought were lost forever. Mom, Ethan said one evening, Dad says when I was little I tried to eat his nose. That's true, I laughed. You thought everything was food. And Dad says you sang me the Itsy Bitsy Spider every night. Also true. Then why don't you live together anymore? Other moms and dads live together. There it was, the moment I dreaded. Because sometimes grown-ups need time to figure out how to be together after something bad happens. Will you figure it out? I don't know, buddy, we're trying. And we were trying. Therapy was painful. Hours spent in Dr. Ramirez's office, peeling back layers of hurt, anger, guilt, and love. Daniel told the full truth. Not just about what happened, but how he'd lived these 3 years, how he thought about us every day, how he'd driven to Chicago a few times just to watch our house from afar. I saw you taking Ethan to preschool, he said during one session. Last fall, you looked strong, happier than when I left you, and I thought maybe I'd been right. Maybe you were better off without me. What made you move to Denver? Dr. Ramirez asked. I couldn't keep living as a ghost, but I couldn't come back either, so I decided to start somewhere else, be someone else, be David instead of Daniel. But you couldn't escape yourself, I said. No, I couldn't. Slowly, so slowly, we started to rediscover each other. The Daniel who came back wasn't the same man I'd lost. He was more serious, more careful, more aware of the cost of his choices. And I wasn't the woman he'd left. I was stronger, more independent, less likely to trust blindly, but there was still a connection. In the way he laughed at my jokes, in the way I instinctively turned to him when Ethan did something funny, in the way we both froze when our hands accidentally brushed Dot. The breakthrough came 4 months later. Ethan got sick. A typical kid's cold, but with a fever that scared me. Daniel was there all night, helping me care for him, bringing ice, reading stories when Ethan couldn't sleep. At 3 in the morning, when the fever finally broke, we sat in the living room of my new apartment, exhausted and worried. "Thank you," I said, "for being here." "Where else would I be?" He looked at me, surprised. "He's my son." And suddenly, I realized that somewhere along the way, I'd stopped doubting he'd stay. Somewhere between therapy sessions and park outings, late-night talks and shared dinners, I'd started to trust him again. "Sarah," he said quietly, "I know we said no rushing, but can I stay tonight, on the couch, just to be close if Ethan needs us?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. He stayed, and the next night too. By the end of the week, we realized he was basically living with us. "This is weird," I said one morning as we made breakfast together. He was flipping pancakes, I was brewing coffee, and Ethan was building a pillow fort in the living room. "What's weird?" "How this feels." "Normal, like you never left." "But I did leave." "Yeah, you did." We stood in silence, listening to Ethan's laughter from the next room. "Sarah," Daniel said, not turning from the stove, "I love you. I loved you when I left. I love you now, and I'll love you always. But I don't expect you to say it back. Not after what I did." "Daniel, this is enough for me. Being here, being part of your life, Ethan's life, it's enough that you gave me a second chance." I walked over to him, standing close. He was taller than me, and I had to tilt my head to meet his eyes. "What if it's not enough for me to just be here?" I said. "What if I want more?" The hope in his eyes was painfully beautiful. "Then tell me what you want." I took a deep breath. "I want to try again, really try. Not because we were married once, not because of Ethan, but because I still love you. Despite everything, I still love you." He kissed me then, gently, cautiously, as if afraid I might vanish. "Mom! Dad!" Ethan burst into the kitchen. "You're kissing! Does that mean you're back together?" "Yes, buddy," I laughed. "It means we're back together." "Yay!" He bounced around the kitchen. "Now we're a real family." And you know what? We were. Not the family we used to be. That family died 3 years ago when I thought I lost Daniel. But we were a new family, built from the ashes of the old one, stronger because we knew how fragile happiness could be. A year has passed since that day in the coffee shop. Daniel and I got married again, a small ceremony, just the 3 of us and a few close friends. Ethan was our best man, and when the officiant asked if anyone objected to the marriage, he shouted, "I'm all for it," making everyone laugh. We still go to therapy, probably will for a long time, because what we went through doesn't just disappear. I still have days when I wake up in a panic, thinking Daniel's gone again. He still has nightmares about the people who hunted him. But we're working through it. Together. People sometimes ask how I could forgive him, how I could trust him with my heart again after such a betrayal. And I tell them the truth. Forgiveness isn't a one-time act. It's a choice you make every day. A choice to let go of pain, to believe in something better, to build a future instead of living in the past. That doesn't mean I've forgotten. The scars are still there. But scars are proof you survived, proof you healed, proof you're strong enough to keep going. A's for the woman who stood in that coffee shop a year ago, staring at the ghost of her past. She was right about one thing. Her world did collapse a second time. But sometimes things have to fall apart to be rebuilt better. My name is Sarah Mitchell, and this is my story of how sometimes the darkest moments in life can lead to the most beautiful beginnings, of how love can survive even death and rebirth, of how family isn't just blood, it's the choice we make every day. And this morning, when Daniel ordered coffee at that same Starbucks on 16th Street, and Ethan tugged at my hand demanding hot chocolate, I realized I finally know what true happiness is. It's not the absence of pain. It's finding joy despite the pain, love despite the fear, hope despite the darkness. That's us. That's our family. That's our second life. And it's beautiful.